That's not how you're supposed to do it.
Who says? I know how we should do it.
Hey, what are you guys fighting about?
We're trying to play a new game.
And nobody wants to do the right thing.
That's because you won't listen to anybody.
You guys take it easy. I think what you need is a plan and a leader. Someone to follow. I remember a very famous man in the Bible who had to convince his army to follow him and some very strange instructions from God. Do any of you remember who that was?
No.
This man served God's most faithful prophet, Moses, and he became one of God's most faithful followers too. His name was Joshua.
Is this the guy who helped Moses get the 10 Commandments?
Yes, he was very loyal to Moses, and when Moses died, he became one of God's most loyal followers too.
But the way Ryan wants to play the game doesn't make any sense. Do this, do that.
You know what? The things that God told Joshua to do didn't even make sense either. But he obeyed God, and in the end, something incredible happened. Here, I'll tell you what. I'm going to be the leader, and I want you guys to do whatever I say, even though it sounds a little bit silly, okay? All right, first, whenever I say Joshua, I want you guys to pull on your ears like this. Good. And every time I say faithful, I want you guys to pat your head with your hand like this. Good. And finally, every time I say obey or obeyed, I want you guys to roll your head around and around like this. Joshua was Moses' faithful servant. He went with Moses when Moses climbed Mount Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments from God. The 10 Commandments told the people how they should live in order to be good people.
Come, faithful Joshua. Let us bring the law of God down to the people.
While Moses was on the mountain getting the laws from God, the Israelites turned against Moses and God and did very bad things. When Moses returned and saw how they were behaving, he became very angry. Only the people who were willing to follow God's laws were saved. It was Moses who led the fight against the bad people in the camp. Throughout the Israelites' long journey through the wilderness after Moses led them out of Egypt, Joshua served Moses and God faithfully. When Moses knew it was time for him to die, he chose Joshua to become the people's new leader. Moses knew Joshua would obey God and lead the people into the promised land of Canaan. Joshua created the Israelites' first army, turning a bunch of ordinary people into warriors who fought in the name of God.
Again! Again! Attack! Attack! In the name of Moses! In the name of Israel! In the name of God! Attack!
But I don't understand. Why did the Israelites have to fight?
The people were going through a land where there were many evil people, and many of the people didn't even want them to get to Canaan. They didn't truly believe that God had promised them the land. Remember, the people of Israel had been slaves in Egypt for many, many years, and the other people wanted them to remain slaves.
Didn't they get tired of all that walking across the desert?
Oh, I'm sure they did, but they had faith, and they obeyed Joshua and Moses and God. How long do you think the journey took?
40 years. That's a lot of faith.
Throughout the people's journey, they carried the Ark of the Covenant, their most special religious object. Inside the Ark were some of the Israelites' holiest items, including 2 stone tablets with the 10 Commandments written on them. The Israelites carried the Ark before them in a battle and knew God was with them. They believed that as long as they could see the Ark of the Covenant, God walked among them. God told Joshua that Jericho had to be destroyed because the city was full of very bad people with sinful ways. God called it a pagan city. Do you know what pagan means? A pagan is someone who is a non-believer, who worships something or someone other than the one true God. But there was a big problem about getting into Jericho. Do you know what it was?
I remember. Jericho was surrounded by a great big stone wall.
Nobody could get over it.
That's right. The city of Jericho had a huge wall that went all the way around it, and it was really hard for anyone to attack the city. Joshua sent spies into the city to see what the city was like. The spies came back to Joshua and reported that the city had lots of food and water, and many warriors and weapons. It would be very difficult for the Israelites to get into the city. What do you think Joshua's army officers thought when they saw the tall, tall wall?
They probably said it was hopeless, and they couldn't get over it.
But remember, God was helping them. And even though it seemed impossible to Joshua's generals, Joshua had faith in God and knew that God would lead them into the city. Joshua followed God anywhere.
We put ourselves into a terrible position. Now the river is at our back. We have all the armed cities of Canaan before us.
My counselors believe we should move south. Start with a smaller campaign.
If Joshua insists on this madness, we will waste the flower of our army on those walls. Better to attack a less formidable position until we have time to build up our strength.
Joshua was very excited about the Israelites' upcoming battle. His generals were worried. They could see no way that the small army could make their way into the city over that huge wall.
The Amorite bastion is fat and ripe for an attack.
When will that be, General?
By the first of the new moon, brave Zebulon.
Joshua told the generals that they would attack in just 7 days, even though the Jericho army was well supplied and very powerful. The generals couldn't believe what Joshua was telling them. They wondered how the Israelites could possibly be successful.
Would they give in without a fight? Are they asking covenant of us?
They scorn us and our presence. They're as strong and well supplied as we had imagined. They could withstand a siege of years.
Then how do we make this powerful pagan fortress ours? Surely not by throwing ourselves against those high and remorseless walls.
With faith, my able and worried commanders, God has spoken to me. And I will tell you the plans, for we begin at the break of dawn.
By your leave, mighty Joshua, it will take weeks for us to strengthen our army.
This victory will not come by the strength of our arms, but by the power of God.
Joshua made it clear to his generals that the Israelites were to take nothing from Jericho, not even the grain stored in the city to feed their hungry people. Because God had told Joshua not to take anything, and Joshua always obeyed.
Nothing, generals, is to be taken from the city. Our only purpose here is to destroy this abomination with the sword and with fire.
The generals were very curious. They wanted to know how their army was to enter Jericho.
The ark will be called forth and placed in the center of the march. 7 priests with 7 trumpets will precede it. Each day, we will go forth in battle array and march around the walls once. No sound will come from the ranks. Only the blare of the trumpets will be heard.
So what'd they do? Ram the walls with a great big pole and they got down blowing the trumpets?
No, not that. Joshua knew that God was more powerful than anyone. And if Joshua and his people obeyed, then the people would soon enter the city of Jericho, as God had promised. For 6 days, the people marched around the Great Wall. It was silent, except for the sound of the trumpets by the priests. Then, on the 7th day, they made 7 trips around the wall in complete silence. At the end of the 7th march, God's promise was kept. God made the mighty wall of Jericho tumble down, and the Israelite soldiers entered the city as God had promised they would.
Israel! Cry glory! Cry vengeance! Charge!
Despite the general's doubts, God had kept his promise and made it possible for the Israelites to enter Jericho and claim it for God.
I bet those generals were probably pretty surprised.
I bet they'd never won a battle with trumpets before.
No, but do you think it was the trumpets that caused the wall to fall?
No, it was God's awesome power.
That's right.
Joshua wasn't surprised.
No, he wasn't. Why?
He had faith. He obeyed God.
Because Joshua loved God.
You're exactly right. Joshua asked God for help, and he listened to God and did whatever the Lord said, even though sometimes he didn't understand God's plans. Kind of like our parents who ask us to do stuff, and we do it even though we don't understand or want to. Can you guys think of something that your parents ask you to do that don't always make sense?
My dad won't let me stay up past 8 o'clock on school nights, but my friend Eddie gets to stay up as late as he wants.
And how's Eddie doing in school?
Well, he gets in trouble for falling asleep.
Remember that time we were in a wreck? Mom said if we hadn't had our seatbelts on, we would have been hurt really bad.
I know. Sometimes the people we love really do know what they're talking about. Kind of like God, right? Okay, let's pretend like we're the army officers marching around the city. Okay, this is going to be Jericho, this table right here. And I want you guys to do everything I say, okay? When Joshua faced the tall, tall wall,
Joshua faced the tall, tall wall.
he asked God's help to make it fall.
He asked God's help to make it fall.
God told Joshua to march around.
God told Joshua to march around.
Joshua obeyed and the wall fell down.
Joshua obeyed and the wall fell down.
Now, do you see why sometimes you just have to do the things you're asked to do, even though they don't always make sense at the time?
You mean like patting our heads and pulling our ears and rolling our heads around?
Exactly.
But I don't see why we had to do all that. It still seems silly to me.
Didn't I tell you? Remember, what is it that you have to have?
Faith.
Yes, and you have to.
Obey.
Because God always keeps his
promises.
So what'd you promise us?
I didn't think I promised you anything. But because you guys were so good and you did everything I asked, how about some ice cream?
Joshua faced that tall, tall wall.